Straight ahead on Main Street, old, new, and natural. Art professor Mike Nichols took a year of his life to bring the ancient form of fresco to Western Kentucky University. Another artist, Durkee, transforms his creative vision into functional and timeless works of art. And finally, we'll spend a day at Bernheim Forest and Arboretum with artist Patrick Dougherty as he transforms natural materials into a journey through his imagination. Coming right up on Main Street.
Funding for Main Street was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you who support quality programs such as Main Street that appear only on public television.
Hello and welcome to Main Street. I'm Barbara Deeb. On this edition of Main Street, we're going to bring you the work of three very different artists, and yet they all have a common thread. They transform materials or ideas from the past into works that are relevant for today. So stay tuned. Art professor Mike Nichols has brought the ancient form of art known as fresco to the campus of Western Kentucky University in the newly renovated Van Meter Auditorium. Now, the process is just fascinating to watch, and now that he's had a couple months to reflect on the work, he lets us in on this most unique experience.
I think that I'm a fresco painter. You know, that's a broad term though. You know, there are fresco painters. They're the Michelangelos of the world, and there are people who are, you know, just beginning to learn the trade. And I feel like I'm over the doorstep, but I can see a long tunnel. There's a lot more that I have to learn and do. Some of the earliest examples that we have, I guess the actual systematic use of fresco would go back to the Minoans, thousands of years ago. The Romans used it. You know, they would decorate their villas, their palaces with fresco and things like that. The Renaissance, frescoes flourished during the Renaissance. Patrons had lots of money. The church, princes, whomever it may be, they would hire artists for these big projects, and sometimes a lot of times the murals would be statements about those very powerful people or institutions. It was used and still is used here or there, you know, in Europe and even in the United States in small places, in small amounts. But in the United States, it was used during the Great Depression. But after the Great Depression, after the WPA projects were no longer funded, the technique, which takes a lot of resources, naturally kind of fell by the wayside. And here we are now, you know, trying to dabble in it again and see if we can't start the engine up one more time. I would like to see how I can make the technique more contemporary, more accessible. Those murals are they're grueling. That wall is a lot of work, a lot of material. It's not so forgiving. You know, how can you take that basic process of pigment being locked into a plaster surface? How can you take that and do something new with it so that it can exist, you know, in everyday use for artists, where they don't have to undertake a mammoth project. So little tile, you know, big collages of small frescoes, whatever it might be, but there are some things that I think, some fertile ground for that technique still. Oh, the image to me means a lot of work. In terms of the medium, obviously, Van Meter is a building that could have held a fresco painting. You know, it was built in the early 1900s, at the same time that other buildings in the United States were being painted with frescoes. And I like that it looks back, you know, the fresco harks back to Van Meter's history even a little bit. I think that the scale of the figures they're definitely, I wouldn't say influenced by Van Meter, but they seemed fitting to me. You know, I liked that there was a railing just a handful of feet behind the mural. it forces people up close to that mural. And they're getting a chance to inspect it and see what a fresco is up close. You know, it's not a ceiling that's where there's 50 feet between them and all that air. You know, they can get up and say, oh, well look at that little scar, and it's a giornata, you know, and why in the world is that there? And then they realize that maybe it was pieced together like a puzzle. And the process maybe reveals itself a little bit to them. So I like that. In that regard, I think it definitely did. It was influenced. I also think that just the scale of the mural and the color and some of those choices on my part were tied to how I felt the second floor needed a bit more weight, visual weight. You know, when I would walk in Van Meter, you'd see these beautiful staircases, and there was the wonderful railing up top, and then there was just a big barren white wall behind that. And I thought it would be great if there was something up there that would invite the viewer up those stairs. And so I hoped that my painting would reach above the railing, and you could see it from the first floor, which you can, and people might be like, wow, there's something for us to see up there. We should go inspect that and activate that second floor. You know, at the very least, I hope that it makes them think and wonder. You know, I hope it makes them feel. Part of that image, you know, the monumental scale of the figures was, I was trying to echo the physical nature of that material, you know, and what that monumental mural is. Like, how can you stir that response to the physical form in the viewer? You know, they're confronted by it, and so I hope that they feel something. I hope they question it. I hope that maybe they want to know more about the process. Maybe they want to know more about how the image came about, who influenced the image, how do they feel the image, what do they feel the image means. You know, I think if anything, just make them think and sense. I have watched people interact with it while I was painting it. They seem very, very interested. You know, to see somebody making something is fascinating these days. You know, sometimes we get everything prepackaged and it's glossy and painted perfectly, and nobody knows how it got to that state. This is a chance for people to see it building out from the wall. And I've had little opportunities for people in the community to come and even paint a little portion of it. You know, and of course it wouldn't stay, I'd scrape it, but just a chance for them to kind of move a brush on a piece of wet plaster on the mural, and watching how people respond to the act of painting a fresco. That really grabs them, which I relate to that because it grabbed me. You know, it's about these big murals that I've seen in my life, but it's also about just how I experienced the making of those frescoes, those little ones that I was doing, and how active the medium is, how it responds to your brush. And it's amazing to me to watch people who have no art experience and no history with art coming up and just putting the brush in, and once they see the water kind of get sucked into the wall, they're like, oh, not expecting it, and they get sucked right in too, you know? You know, one thing I liked about painting the fresco, as hard as it was to begin work at 8 in the morning on one day and to end it at 6 a.m. the next day, as hard as that was, there's something really beautiful and peaceful about painting late at night on scaffolding by yourself. It's just you and this big, huge image. You know, the lights are dim, and I could look out a window and see what the weather's like out there at night, and knowing that everybody else is kind of asleep, but it's just me and the wall there. I think that of all the things that I'm going to reflect on as I age and get older, I'm gonna probably miss that a little bit. I did like that solitude. Maybe it's just, what is it about that I like so much? I'm not sure. It's peaceful. You know, it's sort of like meditative in some regards too. I mean, honored, obviously, to have been given the opportunity to put something in a space for that amount of time. And you know, it is exciting and touching to think about the fact that, you know, maybe I'll be long gone and people will still have there's some residue of me there. You know, they're going to wonder, maybe it'll be a student, maybe it'll be a couple students who are curious about art or the fresco process, and they'll dig a little bit and find, oh, well, this guy was a professor here, or whatnot. But I think about tomorrow in the short term, not so much 100 years down the line.
Burlington, Kentucky artist Doug Durkee has always considered himself a creative person. But after a brush with his own mortality, his work began to gravitate more toward the concept of time. The result is art that's not only a thing of beauty, but functional as well.
Starting out to be an artist, I think it began back many years ago when I started looking at shape and form around me and color. Didn't create the first clock until about 2001. It was after a major accident. I was proceeding down the highway and suddenly I saw something dark to my side. A car had lost control with an 18-wheel truck behind me and drove into the side of my van, knocked the van completely over. And now at this point, I'm sliding down the highway at a high rate of speed, and I thought I was going to die. Somehow the van righted itself in the highway, and I drove in shock off to the side of the road. Right after that happened, I created endless time, because I realized my time on this planet is not endless. And that's kind of how it began. So 10 years later, I've created more than a trilogy of clocks. I'd say there's about 6 of them now, or 7 clocks that I've created. I wanted to do things that were creative, make things that were nice to look at. I'm very thankful to have found that, because I think a lot of people go through their whole life and never really find what inspires them. And to be able to find that in your work, that's it. And like Dad used to say, you only have to be good at one thing in life to be successful. I'm always drawing other pictures to create new clocks, new ideas. What would it be like if I did this, that shape, that form, or whatever. Always with the idea of floor clocks, or shall we say a contemporary grandfather clock. Something tall that makes a statement in the room. I draw the picture of what it is, and then I go from the picture to, well, what sizes are things going to be, what materials and all, and so on. A lot of times I'll use cardboard as a medium, because cardboard's inexpensive and you can cut it up and change the form, change the shape without putting it through a saw, or doing a lot of sculptural work with the piece. Like Springtime, it took a lot more time because I had to make the flanges and shape them and form them. It's more of a free-flowing type of piece. Use a lot of different kinds of materials. Lots of times that's a decision depending on the shape and form of what you're working with. Lately I've been experimenting back into wood again. I hand the blueprints over to my help and I say, you build it. Not all the way. I always have a hand in each piece I make. The finale is critical. I love to take that over. I take my creative talent and that's where I come into play, and I shape and form and I do the actual finishing work and the finals. And that's what makes it very much my work. The finale is the most greatest part of the whole piece. When you're doing the final piece, final aspect of the artistic piece, you know that today you're going to finish that piece. That's the fun time. That's the best time of all. Because there you have it. It's done. And it looks, hopefully, as beautiful as you inspired it to be. Everything in life has a meaning, and I think art, if you're truly in touch with your emotions artistically, you create things according to what's going on around you at that particular time. So it's important to keep evolving. Future of the work has to be evolving all the time, and I think that's paramount and important in my relationship with my art, is to evolve. And I will do that till the day I die, because I really love art. It's fascinating, it's fun, and it's a great experience, and I can't think of anything I'd rather do.
Bernheim Forest and Arboretum in Bullitt County has a new installation. It's called Snake Hollow. There, artist Patrick Dougherty and over 40 volunteers have gathered willow limbs and woven them into a fantasy of shape and imagination that you really have to see to believe.
have started a new program called Sighted at Bernheim, which is where Bernheim actually goes out and we commission a piece. We seek support from the community to be able to do this, and then we identify an artist that has a particular interest in nature-based art, and then we invite them to come and do something at Bernheim. Patrick Dougherty is our first Sighted at Bernheim artist, and he arrived here on April 6th, and he worked until about April 26th, and in that period of time worked with lots of volunteers and staff, and took 5 dump truck loads full of cut willow and turned them into a massive site-based installation of art. It's really incredible.
Well, I guess I had to figure out what birds and beavers already knew, and that these sticks have an infuriating tendency to tangle. So that's the simplest method of joining, and it allows the piece to be built without any interference from kind of contemporary ties or something like a string and wire and so forth. Right, I usually think of the design when I'm there, when I can fully appreciate the place. Usually I only visit for a few minutes, and so when I've come back, then I'm going to be in that place. So I try to take the full measure of that space and try to understand what it is and how people use it, and then try to build a piece that somehow fits and has a kind of interplay with the surrounding woods, or if it's in a building, the building that's in, and you know, try to build something that people feel like, oh, might have been a natural occurrence, that it could have improbably been blown in, or you know, spun off, or somehow came down the river and lodged there, so that you know, it looks human made, you know it is, but you know, there's a kind of wild freedom about it that makes you feel like that is somehow connected with the momentum of the natural world. I lay the piece out with extension cords or something, and I kick it around. I kick it around, the lines around, until I feel like that there's adequate space to move through it and in it. You know, I want the doorways to be kind of big and luxurious, or small and kind of squeezing, but you know, the different experiences of trying to go in and out. Some kids can use, some adults can use. If you don't like it, go back a little bit and take another doorway. So then I set my scaffolding up around the piece and use it as kind of an exoskeleton. And as you see, some of this tunnel leans, and sometimes it bends one way or another, it fattens and narrows, and all of that, that attitude, that gesture is put in by roping it to the scaffolding around it and then forcing the shape that I like. Then I'll go and I'll put a kind of a layer of, kind of a structural layer of sticks on it, in which we go all different directions. And then once I get something like building a canvas, then I'm able to draw on it. So then I start aestheticizing it and putting lines where I think they look really good. So that's kind of the second thing. And then finally, we're about to enter the third phase, which is the cosmetic phase of trying to not just make it look good, but make it safe, make it look smooth, and then take little sticks that don't count that much and erase things I don't like.
Most of the reaction to date has been during the installation phase. And so that type of interaction is unique in that many of the people that reacted with the piece were actually helping to build it. And so now they have a connection with the piece because they were working with the artist. But we've also I've had my own child out here who, before it was finished, took her into the piece, and you could just see her eyes light up, and she equated it to a fairy house because it's made out of natural objects. She's built those at home, so she just thought all of a sudden her little bitty fairy houses had become human scale or bigger, and she just had a grand time with it. The reactions have been all across the board. Always wonder, always surprise, always delight, always questioning how in the world did that happen, those kinds of things.
The general public, as they come by, if they're infatuated enough, start feeling, you know, like, oh, they would like to look at it. If they bring their families back, you know, they've finally kind of entered the illusion that I hope to cast a spell of, you know, something interesting to look at and fun to explore. And so there's a kind of ownership in returning. But then if you see your neighbors working on it, then there's a way that endears it to you as well, and you feel like, in fact, you do. And then there's the drama of building, which if you come numerous times while we're working on it, and you see how the thing is built, then all of a sudden you're kind of woven into the process itself.
I mean, really, you've done an enormous amount of work. You've done a lot of fill.
Snake Hollow is the title that he gave the piece, and he wanted a title that children could maybe say and connect with. One of the philosophies that's imbued in his art is this kind of playfulness in childhood and secret spaces of childhood. And so it has, roughly it takes on the form of two kind of interwoven snakes. And when you visit the piece, you don't necessarily get an immediate sense of that, but when you kind of travel around within the piece, you can either be on the interior of one of those snakes, or both of them, and then between those two snakes. So it's a bit of a labyrinth or a maze or a tangle, a weaving of natural objects and that you get to be a part of.
I'm a sculptor, so I like making things, and I like seeing my ideas get worked out in a public way. So, you know, that's a pleasure in itself. I'm really a hard working person, and I like working hard, and I've kind of understood the freedom that comes from throwing yourself into something so fully. You know, some people feel like work is just a way of providing for their family, but for me, there's a vitality in it. There's a way of, there's great depth in throwing yourself into a project, you know, and I have to say that my work is intensely used. It's intensely viewed even during its installation, and lots of people are talking to me, and then I have the conviviality of working with the volunteers, and so there's not such a loss. My job is to make things, and other folks, the public's job is to evaluate and enjoy, and I can leave these works in good hands.
Well, our journey has come to an end, but don't let it stop there. We welcome any questions, comments, or story ideas. Let us hear from you. You can write to us at Main Street, care of WKYU PBS, 1906 College Heights Boulevard, number 11034, Bowling Green, Kentucky, 42101. Or call us at 270-745-2400 or 1-800-599-2424. And don't forget the World Wide Web. Check out our webpage at the address on your screen. Here you can find our email address as well. We hope you've enjoyed this look at the interesting people, places, and things that make our Commonwealth so unique. Until next time, I'm Barbara Deeb from the stage of Van Meter Auditorium on the campus of Western Kentucky University, where we're just around the corner on Main Street.